Good morning. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, at least for the next couple of additional weeks. General session meeting on June 7th, 2023. Appreciate folks attending with us here today. We've got a relatively short docket, but first we'll start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner McGowan. Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ray.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins. Mr. Chair, you have 4 out of 7 commissioners present.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. As is obvious, there's 3 of us here today, or 4 of us here today. Chair Robbins is not with us, neither is Commissioner McGowan. And so I'll be chairing the meeting for today. We did, generally we would have public comment after the roll call of commissioners. We didn't have anyone sign up for general public comment. However, we did have 1 written public comment from CC4CA. And I did want to just initially make a comment on that. They had inquired about the status of the cumulative impacts rulemaking and where we were in the next steps. And as Chairman Robbins indicated at the last hearing, the cumulative impacts rulemaking is still on track as was anticipated and presented on numerous times over the last couple of months. There was a slight pause in some of the activity associated with the cumulative impacts process based on what ultimately would have been the outcome of HB 23-1294 that did have some information within that piece of legislation that would perhaps inform some of the cumulative impacts process as we continue to move forward. That bill was signed by the governor yesterday. And so my guess is that that creates some clarity as to the framework of how the cumulative impacts process will continue to move forward. And so for folks that are interested in that process, certainly stay tuned as to next steps. With that, there is now an opportunity for commissioners to provide comments. Are there other commissioners that would like to share their thoughts here this morning? Okay, seeing no one raising their hands, I will then go on to the consent agenda. Does any commissioners have questions about the consent agenda that was presented? With no questions, I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
I believe that's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next up on the agenda is docket number 2207-00195, which is an oil and gas development plan by BNL Enterprise Incorporated, represented by Joseph Pirchala. So if we want to raise the applicant's presenters and then take a moment before we start to allow the witnesses or the applicants to be sworn in. Mr. Pirchala, do you have everyone here that intends to present, or do we need to elevate additional folks?
Yes, good morning. We do have everyone. Oh, I see Andrea present and I see Peter present. Yes, we are all set.
Okay. AAG Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the 2 witnesses, I'll just ask you each in turn to raise your right hand, state your name, and say that you swear to tell the truth. I'll start with Ms. Gross. If you could just state your name and say that you swear to tell the truth.
My name is Andrea Gross, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Condrat?
Hi, yes, my name is Peter Condrat, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you, AAG Mercer. So next up, Mr. Pirchala, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, Acting Chair Mesner and commissioners. My name is Joe Pirchala with Wellborn Sullivan Meckin Tooley, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant BNL Enterprise. I'd like to thank staff and Director Murphy for all of their hard work on this oil and gas development plan. With me today are Peter Kondrat, Chief Operating Officer for BNL, and Andrea Gross, the project lead of Upstream Petroleum Management, who worked on all permitting efforts for the oil and gas development plan. BNL has one oil and gas development plan application before you today. It's similar to its previous applications, which have involved helium development in Los Animas County, Colorado. For an overview, BNL's Galactica Pegasus 2 OGDP covers approximately 1,920 acres in Los Animas County. And that covers all of sections 1, 2, and 3, Township 30 South, Range 54 West. The application requests that the Commission approve 3 oil and gas locations: the Jackson 013054 pad, the Jackson 023054 pad, and the Jackson 033054 pad. There would be 1 vertical well on each location to explore for and produce helium gas from the Lions Formation. BNL's leasehold is a combination of fee and federal leases that grant BNL the right to produce helium gas on these lands. The fee lessor is also the surface owner for these locations. With regard to spacing, the lands are not subject to any commission spacing orders and therefore are subject to Rule 401. BNL is proposing to develop the application lands on a leasehold basis subject to Rule 401B. Specifically, the Lions Formation is less than 2,500 feet in depth. The wells would be located more than 200 feet from lease lines, and there are no other existing or permitted wells in the Lions Formation within 300 feet of the proposed wells. Therefore, no spacing is required and spacing has not been applied for. The 3 locations are proposed on rural rangeland on fee surface. BNL has worked cooperatively with the surface owner as well as the Nature Conservancy, which holds a conservation easement over these lands. And it's entered into a surface use agreement that memorializes the parties' agreement as to the locations of the well sites and the access roads. The SUA with the surface owner and the Nature Conservancy is designed to ensure the continued protection of the character and conservation values of the lands. These locations do not meet any criteria under Rule 304B2B. Therefore, an alternative location analysis was not required and none was conducted. In addition, Rule 604B is not applicable in this application. The Commission's review is pursuant to Rule 301A, and it can and should accept the findings of staff as set forth in the Director's recommendation for approval of the application. As you will hear today, these locations are on a remote part of rural, privately owned rangeland that's used for cattle operations. There are no receptors within 2,000 feet of the locations. BNL's helium operations are very low impact, and BNL has a surface use agreement with the surface owner and Nature Conservancy that does govern the operations on the lands. Based on these considerations and the Commission's applicable operating rules and regs, BNL submits that the proposed oil and gas development plan will protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, and the environment, and protect against adverse impacts to air, water, soil, and biological resources. Los Animas County is the relevant local government, but it does not regulate the siting of oil and gas locations. BNL has consulted with the county regarding these locations, and no objections have been received from the county. The county does, however, require building permits for the locations, and those permits are pending the approval of this OGDP application. With respect to notice, BNL has given all notice required under the rules. No petitions or interventions were received. And on June 1st, 2023, the Director issued the Director recommendation, which recommends approval of BNL's application. Therefore, we request that BNL's application be approved, that the Commission find that the oil and gas development plan satisfies the Conservation Act and Commission rules, that is protective of public health, safety, welfare, and the environment, and that it will protect against impacts to air, water, soil, and biological resources. And with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Kondrat and Ms. Gross, who will provide a presentation on the development plan, the locations, and as well as answer questions from the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, Acting Chair Messner and Commissioners. My name is Peter Kondrat, Chief Operating Officer of Blue Star Helium and BNL Enterprise, which is our operating arm of the company. This slide deck here is one that we've sent before. It includes a lot of base slides for information about helium operations. And anytime you have any questions, please let me know. I'll go ahead and advance, Andrea. So it's just, just disclaimer. Go ahead to the next slide. So again, you have any questions, just introducing Blue Star B&O Enterprise. We've gone on this before, helium, critical mineral. As you guys know, as Joe has indicated, and we've indicated in the past, this is a low impact operations. We kind of summarize some helium versus oil and gas impact. Los Animas helium geology, and then we'll go to our OGDP locations. Anytime you have any questions, I do want to note that we are very proud of our work working with the Jackson family and the Nature Conservancy. We've worked hand in hand with them, identifying best management practices, of course, following the COGC rules and regulations, of course, but working with the to minimize the impact, preserve the character of the land, and preserve the public health and safety. Go ahead, Andrea, next slide. A little bit about Blue Star. It's an Australian-based company. We're really excited. We have 2 different project areas. This is one of them, where we're going to be producing helium soon. You've seen these slides before. Any questions, let me know. Andrea, go ahead and advance. These are some of the uses of helium. Helium is a very valuable element out there, where it has specific applications that cannot be replicated by any others. Go ahead and advance the next slide, Andrea. These are low pressure, shallow wells, no fracking. There's no hydrocarbons in the area. Historically, it's a result of the natural geology. We have no hydrocarbon production, revenue, or anything, or equipment. Next slide, please. It just kind of gives a base geology slide of how helium's formed and accumulated. Go to the next slide, please, Andrea. Again, this Los Animas County, we should be proud in Colorado. This is a world-class helium deposit, and we're getting ready to embark on exciting development and production. Next slide, please. Soon I'll turn it over to Andrea, but these are the 3 locations for the wells. As Joe's indicated, there's none of these wells are in high priority habitat. There's no, all the locations are on the Nature Conservancy easement. We've been granted approval by them, and for the wells, locations, associated facilities. Associated facilities will have a separator, no burner on that separator, just a pressure separator for 2-phase. In the event of we hit water production, we'll be able to accommodate that. Next slide, please. We're using a very small rig. We've been working with the staff and have developed a plan, of course, where we use a small water well rig. We, cut and stockpile topsoil, lay a liner down, secondary containment around the entire rig and its equipment. Next slide, please. This is an example of actually of a helium plant, what it looks like. On the right there, you can see the helium tube trailers. To the right there, there's pressure swing absorption as the technology that's used to separate the helium for the raw gas and purify it. Next slide, please. Again, just a low impact drilling, small footprint, no fracking. Andrea, I'll let you go from here.
Thank you, commissioners. As I stated before, my name is Andrea Gross, and I'm the permit agent for B&O. I've been doing all of their COGCC and local permitting since they've been in the state. The first location within this OGDP is the Jackson 01 Northwest Southeast 3054. As stated earlier, it's 1 vertical helium well using statewide spacing. They have proposed that during construction, it will be 1.4 acres of disturbance and then reduced down to only 0.2 acres of disturbance after interim reclamation. No ALA criteria was met, therefore no ALA was submitted with this location. One thing to note about the Jackson 01 is it was originally submitted within the OGDP in a slightly different location. After it was submitted, it was there was a small wetland that was field verified with a field visit by our wildlife biologist. It was maybe a couple hundred feet from the working pad surface. We met with COGCC staff and discussed options for this location as we felt that it was too close to that wetland. They gave us the opportunity to keep it where it was and provide an analysis of some best management practices that would ensure the protection of that wetland, or BNL could move the location. After discussion, BNL decided to move the location away from that wetland, which is the location that you see on the map now. We felt it was necessary to ensure the protection, and it ended up being a better location in that there was less disturbance needed for the access road. I do want to thank staff extensively for their help with this location. And I know that a lot of work went into their analysis of this OGDP since it was resubmitted in a different location. The second location is the Jackson 02 Southeast 3054, also one vertical helium well. This one's proposed to be 1.6 acres of disturbance during construction and then reduced down to 0.3. This location has an RBU that is greater than 2,000 feet. However, it is owned by the surface owner, and the location is 300 feet above that RBU, and BNL is using that natural topography as natural mitigation for light, sound, and visual mitigation. This location did have quite a larger or longer access road. However, you know, with the work with the Nature Conservancy and the Jacksons, it is actually a benefit to the rancher, and it will allow him to access much area that has not been able to be accessed easily in the past. The third location is the Jackson 03 Southeast 3054, also one vertical helium well. It's proposed to be 1.3 acres of disturbance during construction and then reduced down to 0.2 acres after interim reclamation. We've stated before, no ALA criteria was met for any three of these locations. And lastly, we wanted to highlight the work that BNL has done with the Nature Conservancy and the Jacksons. The locations are on lands under an easement that was formerly known as the Maverick Ranch. The SUAs that BNL has executed with the Nature Conservancy and the Jacksons lays out best management practices to ensure the protection and conservation of these lands. As Peter said before, they've had extensive conversations and meetings via Zoom as well as in the field to determine the best locations and access roads. We believe that the work that BNL has done with the Nature Conservancy as well as COGCC adds an extra layer of protection to these lands and the public health. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, and I would just like to provide a short closing, if I may. As you've heard, these proposed Jackson locations are in a remote and rural area of rangeland, no receptors within the 2,000-foot buffer of the working pad surface. We believe that given the remoteness, the small footprint size of these well pads, and the real minimal disturbance and low impact nature of these helium operations, including the lack of any hydrocarbon production or emission, that BNL's Galactic Pegasus 2 OGDP does satisfy Rule 301A, and that these proposed operations will protect, minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, and welfare, as well as protect against impacts to air, water, soil, and biological resources. And therefore, we do request, commissioners, that you approve this application. And with that, we are open for questions.
Thank you all for the presentation. At this stage, commissioners have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Commissioners, are there any questions from you all? Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. The first question I want to ask is about some of the conversations with the federal government, given that these will have federal APDs for them. Can you provide just a little bit more detail on ongoing conversations and kind of where you are in that process?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Cross. I can take that question, as Upstream Petroleum will be handling most of the federal permitting as well. There is at least one location that has federal minerals in it. The helium locations will require an APD, a federal APD similar to natural gas and oil operations. That APD will be filed through AFMIS. It will go to the Canyon City office. We've had some discussions, preliminary conversations with the BLM. They're ready and willing and prepared to accept that APD. It will look very similar to what a traditional oil and gas APD will look like. However, BNL is working on I believe it's called a helium purchasing agreement with the BLM, as the helium is clearly somewhat different than natural gas. However, the permitting process will be the same. The same surface surveys will be required for the helium location as you've seen in traditional oil and gas operations. So an archaeological survey will be required, as well as potentially some biological surveys.
But thus far in those kind of introductory conversations you've had with the Canyon City office, there haven't been any concerns identified by the BLM?
No, not at all.
And when do you think that the filing of these federal APDs will be done?
We're working on them now. BNL is still working on some of their bonding for federal. It won't be a problem. It's just in the process of being done. We wanted to make sure that COGCC didn't have an issue with these locations before starting the federal permitting process. So we anticipate it somewhat quickly after approval of these permits.
And do you know if there's been any kind of environmental review from a NEPA standpoint from the federal side, or if they plan on doing a DNA determination of NEPA adequacy or anything like that?
They have not done any NEPA on these locations yet. We anticipate that they're going to want to have an on-site on location. I don't know if they will do a DNA. That's definitely up to them, and that'll be something that we discuss on the on-site.
And then the other question I wanted to ask about is, can you give us, and we're going to kind of back out to a more 30,000 foot level on this one. Can you provide a little bit detail of where these proposed wells are kind of in connection with the wells that you previously had approved before us? And based on that, where do you foresee kind of future drilling occurring and kind of the cumulative impacts of what's happening with the new access roads and new well pads in terms of cumulative impacts?
At first, yeah, so this OGDP2 is a part of a series of 5 OGDPs we set up working with them out there in the COGC to have small little packages that seem to be the preferred process for submittal. It's an area that covers basically the entire ranch area. I will stress that there are really no new access roads. All we're doing is improving the access that's existing 2 tracks or actual roads, private and county road access to private. The only exception to that is the one that Andrea went over, where we are actually going into a new location. We have to do a couple hundred feet of new access road. These wells would be part of a total package that will produce to the helium plant. These 3 wells combined with our state permits, which are 2, and then we have some more we're going to permit, would be the wells that be used for the helium plant, which would be located on private fee and surface on the Jackson Ranch, away from the Nature Conservancy easement.
And so obviously there's a little bit different impacts that we get here. One, we're not near some of the high priority habitat that we've talked about. You're not having some of the fracking and things like that. But have you as a group looked at how all these 5 different OGDPs will have a cumulative impact together, or are you just doing them purely based off of the individual small well packages?
We're doing out the individual well packages, but we're also aware that adds up to a cumulative impact. As Joe indicated, there's no oil and gas facilities at the wellhead or with our processing equipment at the plant. This is no air pollutant emissions except for running the plant, which is a temporary generator that'll have eventually hook up the power. But Andrew, you could maybe better answer the question. You do the cumulative impacts of each OGDP and how those add together. We just have routine well maintenance traffic, the rig itself moving in. I don't know of any other significant impacts.
Yeah, when we've been doing the cumulative impacts plans, all of the impacts that we have analyzed have been pretty much the same for each location. We do understand with multiple OGDPs that does kind of multiply some of the temporary impacts. However, these will be drilled somewhat in phases. So this OGDP first and then the next one. When we've been analyzing them, due to the short drilling window and testing phase, we believe that the impacts are minimal and they're so temporary that we feel that we're preserving the kind of the rural aspects of this location. We understand that it is rural, which is great for us because there are no, residential building units, but we also want to preserve kind of that ruralness as well, because it is beautiful out there and it is untouched. When we've been doing the cumulative impacts plans, we've been tailoring the best management practices for some of these locations. Some of these locations do have longer access roads that we're improving, which is good for the rancher. However, it is creating some dust impacts as well as some air emissions from the traffic. But again, because of the temporary nature and the rural aspects of these and the extensive work that we've been doing with the Jacksons as well as the Nature Conservancy, BNL really feels that our impacts are minimal on an OGDP scale, but also when you start to combine these OGDPs in the areas that BNL is looking at, that they will still be very minimal and temporary, and that the rustic nature of the lands will be kept as is.
That's the only questions I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. And along the same lines as Commissioner Cross, but more from a local level, I note that you don't have a permit in place from Los Animas County. Can you expand a little bit on the nature of your communications, if any, with Los Animas County on this so far? Are they aware of the potential development? Have they given, a verbal go-ahead, or are they completely unaware of these proceedings?
No, I can answer that. Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. The county is very aware of these locations. Part of the Los Animas County permitting process is they received a 30-day notice, and then there are notices within the Los Animas County process that need to be adhered to as well, including signage at the access roads. Those signs were posted in accordance with their regulations. I have received some communication with Mr. Lucero, who is the LGD for Los Animas County. He's given us no concerns with these locations. They are somewhat of a hands-off county, as long as you give them ample notice and you give them the permit, which is really more of like a building permit, like Mr. Pershala said. They don't give us much feedback. We will also be working with Public Works in the event that some improvements to the county road have to be made. The permit for Los Animas County, they require they really like to see copies of the 2A in their filings. They've given us some feedback that an approved 2A is really what they want to see because it's the final product. So as soon as we get that final approval, then we will finish out the permitting process with Los Animas County. But thus far, we have received no negative feedback or any comments and concerns about these 3 locations.
I would like to add to that. We have notified the county extensively, the Planning Commission, Lucero, the Roads and Bridge Department. We're extensively talking to them about our wells, our helium plant, our flow lines, our access road, our impacts. We've been working hand in hand with them to make sure that we match their needs and requirements and communicate well with them. It's been a very good relationship.
Great, thanks for that additional information. My next question is associated with the, you mentioned, Ms. Gross, the access road, and there is significant access road. It was a little tough for me to tell what was new road and what was improved road, but a total disturbance of 57 acres, which is quite high for a well development plan, OGDP. Most of that's attributed, as I can see, to the surface road and to the pipeline disturbance. Can you expand a little bit on that? My understanding is that you intend to co-locate the pipeline with surface road disturbance as much as possible. And could you talk a little bit about, I think I read that you had a 50-foot right-of-way associated with the pipeline and the road. Can you verify whether or not that's correct? And it seems quite large, so I have two questions associated with that, which is, first, is that on Nature Conservancy easement, and did you consult with them, and were they heavily involved in that 50-foot easement discussion, if it does exist? And the second part is, talk a little bit about weed control with significant acreage disturbance. So I can take those one at a time if you need me to repeat.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. It does look like a lot of disturbance, and we understand that. It was based off a 50-foot right-of-way, which would include the access road and the pipeline. That was done very conservatively. It may be smaller than that. It 100% will not be larger than 50 feet, but it did allow us that, it allowed BNL the wiggle room. Part of the Nature Conservancy's SUA is BNL has to consult with them on any new access roads, as well as improvement to any two-track. The existing two-track has been a large consideration when BNL has been choosing their locations. And whenever an existing two-track can be used, they are required to use it per the Nature Conservancy and the Jacksons. There are a lot of existing two-tracks out there. However, some of them do need some extensive upgrading in order to safely navigate those roads with the rigs and the equipment. So while it is a lot of disturbance, we are definitely locating the flow lines and the pipelines with that right of way, and they are going to try to keep that as small as possible. The 50-foot may have been a little larger than what they're actually going to need, but it was definitely done in with the Nature Conservancy's approval. Like I said, that this OGDP, Mr. Condrat and the Nature Conservancy and the Jacksons all had a field visit and looked at all these locations, drove the roads, and everybody signed off on that, including the Nature Conservancy. As far as, I believe I answered that first part of the question. Was there anything else that you wanted me to touch upon before I get into the weed management?
No, that was the last point. Thank you.
Okay. The weed management is also something that is very specifically lined out in the Nature Conservancy SUA. They're very cognizant of any weed issues that may come up with that length and disturbance of an access road. BNL will have a weed management plan that if the Nature Conservancy wants to add any best management practices or specific seed mixes, that will be laid out within that weed management plan.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you addressing those for the record. And my final point, a little bit more of a comment than a question, but Commissioner Cross touched on this a bit too about future potential development. And I think, Mr. Condrat, if I heard you correctly, I think you mentioned that that the commission might prefer OGDPs kind of at a smaller level. And I would say that if we talk about continued development in this area and other OGDPs coming forward, I would ask you to discuss with staff the potential applicability of a cap associated with all of the potentially proposed OGDPs, so that we get a little bit of a cumulative impacts point of view if significant further development is planned.
You understand that. One point I did want to make on that regards is that part of the reason we do this is also because how the prospects are laid out. This is an area that has a lack of data, lack of wells. There's structures mapped up by different means. And so it's really, some of these areas are more exploratory and some of them are lower risk. And so, some of the areas may or may not be developed, may or may not be permitted even. We're learning more as we go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, my final comment, I think, would be I appreciate the comments, Ms. Gross, to try to maintain the rural nature. I'm familiar with this country, and it is very remote. And while it's not high priority habitat, it is significant habitat for wildlife in the area with bighorn sheep nearby, which a lot of people aren't aware of out there in that country. But minimal disturbance and maximum buffer distances are always great for wildlife. So thank you for having that in mind. Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. If there's no further questions, then we can enter into deliberations. Who would like to make the first comments? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I really don't have too many deliberative comments here. We've seen similar proposals in this area. This is a high value resource. The wells are shallow and air rotary and not fracked. And so it's all development is difficult, but it's a comparatively smaller operation. I appreciate the efforts to pipe and not store and truck on a well by well basis. And I am supportive of moving forward with this application. I'm happy to propose a motion if you'd like.
Feel free.
Thank you. And so I would propose that we approve this OGDP as set forth in concordance with the director's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries, and this application is approved. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
So next up on our agenda is docket number 2204000089, which is an enforcement issue. Commissioners, do you want to take a break before we do that? Or seeing how we've only been going about 40 minutes, we can roll right into it, assuming that the parties are available. Commissioner Ackerman?
I say we go ahead and roll, Mr. Chair, if others are okay with it. I know we're going to lose Commissioner Ray at other meetings.
Okay.
Agreed.
Then if we could elevate the appropriate parties for this docket.
Mr. Schultz, just one quick question. Oh, there we are. You do have counsel for the operator on. Thank you.
Okay, as I had indicated before, this is docket number 2204000089. AAG Schultz, do you want to kick us off on this item?
Sure. Thanks, Acting Chair Messner. Good to see you this morning, commissioners. My name is Scott Schultz. I represent the COGCC enforcement staff in this matter. We were before you, I think, twice earlier this year in this matter. We have reached a new stipulated order finding violation. This case involves 10 wells, 7 which are inactive, 3 which are active in Baca County. The penalty involves the old financial assurance rules, Rule 707A. This operator has not been in compliance with them for quite some time. We calculated the penalty, really pretty straightforward penalty calculation. There was no settlement discounts or any sort of mitigating factors involved. As a result of this stipulated order finding violation, Schreider and Company, Inc. will be turning over all of their wells to the orphan well program. There's pretty much boilerplate language in that portion of the order. Other than that, I'm happy to go into any further details on this matter, but possibly might be easier if I answer any questions that you may have as well, commissioners.
Thank you for that, AAG Schultz. Commissioners, do you have any questions on the docket or the enforcement item? Mr. Gray, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Seeing no questions and Not hearing any additional information that is necessary. Commissioners, do you want to provide a motion then?
I'd move to approve the stipulated order finding violation.
And I'll second with a thanks to AAG Schultz and others that worked so hard on this for a number of months to get it in the condition that's in.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. With that, I think that concludes this docket item. And the final item on our agenda is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all for participating today.